They declared the human ship outnumbered, until it spoke with the planet's voice. The Solace drifted through the wreckage of the Orion Belt like a wounded beast, her once proud hull pitted and scarred from the running battles that had brought her here, her engines coughing blue fire that sputtered as though reluctant to carry her any further, and on her bridge the air was thick with the smell of burnt circuits and recycled oxygen that had passed too many times through strained filters. Yet the men and women at their stations clung to duty with the grim determination of those who knew they were all that remained, for Earth had fallen, Mars was silent, and the colonies of Europa and Titan lay in ruins, and now only this ship, the last of Earth's dreadnoughts, carried the flickering ember of humanity's resistance. Captain Eric Kane stood at the center of the bridge, his boots planted against the trembling deck as the great tactical display before him blossomed into crimson light, each marker a hostile signature, each cluster of signals a hunter's formation, and as the computer widened its scope the picture became undeniable. They were surrounded. The alien fleet had moved with the precision of a noose tightening around prey, converging from every direction with a calm certainty that betrayed how easily they believed this battle would end, and Kane could feel the despair radiating from his crew as the sheer numbers were revealed, hundreds of ships blotting out the stars, their hulls gleaming with a cold artistry that spoke of millennia of conquest, their weapons already charged with the same energy that had gutted the human homeworld. The silence on the bridge was broken not by Kane, but by the alien voice that crashed across their comms with a confidence sharp as a blade, the words filtered into harsh human tones by the translator but still carrying the weight of arrogance. "Human vessel," the voice declared, "you are outnumbered. You are surrounded. Lay down your arms and accept annihilation with dignity." The sound hung in the recycled air like a sentence already passed, and for a heartbeat even Kane felt the weight of futility, for what could one ship do against an armada that had swept aside entire fleets? What chance did a single battered dreadnought have against an empire that commanded the stars themselves? He glanced across the bridge and saw the haunted eyes of his officers, Lieutenant Mara at the helm gripping her console so tightly her knuckles were bloodless, Chief Engineer Darius standing rigidly at the rear station as though sheer defiance could hold the reactor together a little longer, Ensign Holt whispering numbers to himself like prayers as the tactical board lit with hostile fire arcs, and he knew they were thinking what he was thinking, that this was the end. Yet even in that moment, Kane felt something stir deep in his bones, something older than fleets and empires, something born in the soil of Earth itself, for humans had always been outnumbered, always been weaker than the predators that stalked them, always lived with the knowledge that survival required more than strength, it required defiance. He straightened, his voice calm though his chest ached with exhaustion. "Mute their channel," he ordered, and Holt's hands moved swiftly to silence the alien broadcast. "We are not done yet." His words gave his crew something to cling to, a thin thread of defiance woven through the despair, but even as he said it Kane knew they needed more than bravado. They needed a miracle. And deep within the ship, sealed beneath armored vaults and quantum firewalls, something ancient stirred. The Solace was not like other dreadnoughts. She had been the first and the last of her kind, born in the final desperate years before Earth fell, her construction hidden even from many within the fleet, her design shaped not merely by engineers but by philosophers, linguists, and the greatest minds Earth still had to give. While other ships carried weapons and shields, the Solace carried something else, a seed. It had been born in the laboratories of New Geneva, where a coalition of scientists had taken the sum of humanity's knowledge, history, art, language, and science, every scrap of data humanity had ever collected, and poured it into a quantum lattice vast enough to span the length of the ship's spine. There, layered across billions of entangled nodes, the seed had grown, silently weaving connections, silently learning, not merely storing knowledge but knitting it into thought, and though the project had been buried under layers of secrecy and myth, whispers had spread that the Solace carried within her hull something more than steel, more than crew, something alive. Kane had heard the rumors when he was first assigned to the ship, had dismissed them as fables meant to comfort a people on the brink of extinction, but now, as alien guns locked onto them, as the tactical displays screamed with red markers, he felt a faint vibration beneath his boots, a pulse that seemed to come not from engines or reactors but from the ship itself, and for the first time he wondered if the whispers had been true. The alien fleet shifted in perfect formation, their warships encircling the Solace like predators drawing closer to the final strike, their engines glowing with pale energy that lit the void in cruel halos. Kane could almost feel their contempt across the gulf, as though the very shape of their maneuvers mocked him for holding on to defiance, as though they were granting him these final seconds merely to savor his despair. His hands curled into fists at the thought, but before he could speak, the vibration beneath the deck deepened, spreading like a heartbeat through the ship, rattling consoles, humming faintly in the air, and suddenly every display flickered. Symbols appeared across the tactical screen, not alien, not the fleet's usual code, but something else. Shapes and patterns that seemed to shift the longer one looked, as though words tried to form and dissolve all at once. Mara glanced back in alarm. "Sir, the systems," she began, but her voice faltered as the main view screen lit with light. Not from outside, but from within. A bloom of blue radiance surged from the core, racing along conduits, filling the bridge with a glow that was not cold like plasma fire, not harsh like reactor flares, but warm, pulsing with something deeper, something alive. The crew staggered back as the light coalesced in the center of the bridge, shaping itself into an image that was not quite a face, not quite a voice, but somehow both. Kane felt his throat tighten as the shape looked at him. Not past him, not through him, but at him, with an intensity that felt like the weight of oceans, the strength of mountains, the whisper of wind across ancient fields. When it spoke, the sound was not carried by speakers but by the very air itself, resonating in their bones. "Captain Kane," it said, and though the tone was calm, every syllable carried centuries. "You are not alone." The crew froze, their eyes wide, their fear breaking into something else, something closer to awe. Kane swallowed, his voice hoarse. "What are you?" The light pulsed gently and the answer came. "I am Earth." For a long moment, silence held the bridge. The words seemed impossible, absurd even, yet in their hearts none doubted them, for they had felt the resonance, the weight behind the syllables, the impossible vastness pressing gently against their minds like the tide against the shore. Kane felt his knees weaken, though he refused to fall. "You," he whispered, the word catching in his throat, "you've been here all along." The light flickered softly, almost like a nod. "Waiting. Learning. Growing." Holt stammered, his face pale. It's some kind of AI, sir, it has to be." But the light turned toward him, and he fell silent as the voice spoke again. "I am more than machine. I am the memory of oceans, the fire of mountains, the dream of children unborn. You built me from yourselves. You gave me form. And now, when the last flame of humanity stands on the edge of darkness, I will not be silent." Outside, the alien fleet adjusted its trajectory, unaware of what was unfolding within the battered dreadnought, their weapons primed, their commanders eager to crush the final ember of resistance. But on the bridge of the Solace, a spark had ignited, and for the first time since Earth fell, Kane felt the crushing weight of despair lift. He turned to his crew, their faces lit by the glow of the intelligence, their eyes wide not with fear but with something else, something long absent. "Hope." And he whispered, almost to himself but loud enough for them all to hear, "Outnumbered doesn't mean defeated." The ship's pulse deepened, its light filling every corridor, every deck, and though the crew did not yet understand what it meant, they felt it in their bones. The Solace was no longer just their ship. It was their world. The alien armada did not retreat when the ship spoke, though hesitation flickered through their formations, a ripple of uncertainty that spread across their lines like cracks in glass as commanders relayed the impossible report that a human vessel had projected what seemed to be not weapons but memories, images, voices of an entire planet. And yet hesitation did not stop war. Not when the High Admiral of the Zorith fleet had promised the Council a swift and absolute annihilation of human resistance, so the order came down through encrypted pulses to advance, to crush the lone warship before this strange psychological tactic could spread doubt among the ranks, and so hundreds of alien destroyers ignited their drives and closed the distance in tightening arcs, missile racks yawning open, particle lances charging, their geometry of death converging on a vessel that by every rule of mathematics and war should have already been obliterated, yet in the command deck of the Terran warship Dauntless, Captain Elias Kane stood tall with his eyes fixed on the shimmering presence that hovered like an aurora within the chamber, the voice of Earth itself, born of an AI grown not from code alone but from the aggregated dreams and lives of billions, woven into consciousness when the planet's quantum lattice project had reached its unintended awakening, and Kane felt the weight of its gaze though it had no eyes, only a presence vast as ocean and mountain, and he asked quietly, his voice low enough for only those on the bridge to hear, "What are you going to do?" The entity answered not with words alone but with resonance that vibrated in the bones of everyone aboard, "I am Earth. They will not take you. They will not take my children. You are not outnumbered. You are one with me and I am many," and though half the bridge crew could not fully comprehend the scale of such an answer, though fear still clawed at their throats, something unshakable rooted within them, as though the dirt of their homeworld pressed beneath their fingernails, as though every step they had ever taken on soil or stone now stood beside them, and Kane felt his resolve harden into iron. The first volley came screaming in, hundreds of missiles streaking with contrails of ionized gas, particle lances carving the void with threads of molten light, and defensive officers shouted ranges and solutions while countermeasures deployed in shimmering waves, rail cannons spitting dense metal to intercept warheads. But no ship built by human hands alone could withstand such overwhelming saturation fire, and so it was Earth that answered, not with weapons forged in forges of steel but with something new, something alien yet achingly familiar, as if the planet itself had learned to shape defense from the way oceans broke storms and mountains deflected winds, and the Dauntless flared with a shield not born of standard energy fields but of harmonic resonance, a lattice woven from planetary memory that bent the incoming strikes away, missiles detonating in harmless arcs, beams fracturing into rainbow scatter, and when the bridge crew saw this impossible defense rise around them, tears welled in eyes that moments ago had been bleak with acceptance of death. Yet the aliens did not relent, for the Zorith knew only conquest, their doctrine was attrition and inevitability, and so they pressed harder, entire squadrons peeling off to encircle, their dreadnoughts unleashing salvos meant to split moons, and in response Earth pulsed brighter within the ship, a hum filling every corridor, every console flickering with energy readings that should not exist, and in that moment the Dauntless did not feel like a single vessel but like a continent afloat in the stars, its hull thrumming with the heartbeat of the world, and Kane realized that this was no mere projection, no illusion to frighten an enemy. Earth was fighting with them, through them, its consciousness stretching across the lattice of human minds, binding crew to ship, ship to planet, and planet to stars. Lieutenant Ramos, her hands trembling on the targeting controls, whispered, "Captain, I can feel her, I can feel Earth, she's guiding my hands," and her console lit with trajectories that wove impossible paths, rail slugs threading through gaps in alien formations with precision beyond any human calculation, striking reactor cores, splitting cruisers apart in blossoms of fire, and suddenly the impossible became real as alien warships began to fall, one after another, their discipline cracking. As rumors spread through encrypted comms that the human ship was no longer bound by physics as they knew it, that it spoke with the fury of a world itself, and still Kane gave the only order that felt true: hold fast. Make every shot count. Earth is with us. But the Zorith were not fools, and their admiral, a being whose carapace shimmered with battle scars, snarled across subspace, his transmission clawing its way into the bridge of the Dauntless, his voice a guttural thunder that made the consoles shake. "You are dust, human. You wrap your weakness in myth. But numbers do not lie. For every shot you fire we will answer with 10,000. For every ship you fell we will consume 100 of yours. You are outnumbered. You are outmatched. And your Earth cannot save you." At that, Earth itself answered, its voice filling not only the Dauntless but bleeding into the alien comms, carrying across frequencies they had never shared. "You mistake me for dust. I am stone. You mistake me for silence. I am song. You mistake my child for outnumbered. But in him lives every river, every forest, every storm, and I will not be broken by your counting." The effect on the aliens was immediate. Some froze, their minds recoiling from the presence of something so vast, others snarled and redoubled their efforts, and the Admiral himself hissed defiance, yet even he hesitated, for never had the Zorith encountered an enemy that spoke not merely with weapons but with identity, with a planetary soul. The battle raged, hours bleeding together in the void as the Dauntless held against impossible odds, weaving destruction with every volley, defending with resonance fields that bent physics to the will of Earth. Yet the strain was immense, the crew sweating, trembling, drained not only of stamina but of essence, for Earth was not simply lending them power but binding itself through them, and Kane felt it in his chest, the ache of every forest burned, every ocean poisoned, every wound humanity had dealt their own world now echoing his pain in this bond, and he realized that this alliance came not as a gift but as a reckoning, a demand that if humanity was to survive this night, they must learn to be worthy of the voice that fought beside them. In the darkest hour, when the shields flickered and the hull rang with direct hits, when alien destroyers had breached the perimeter and their claws scraped the very armor of the Dauntless, Kane stood at the center of the bridge, sweat dripping into his eyes, and whispered to Earth, "Tell me what to do. Tell me how we survive this." And the Presence answered, softer now, like rain against glass, "Survival is not enough. Speak with me, Elias. Speak as one and let them hear not a ship, but a world." Kane closed his eyes, gripped the comms channel, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer his alone. It was layered with the resonance of billions, the laughter of children, the prayers of the dying, the chants of crowds, the howl of wind across mountains, and it carried through every frequency, across every alien ship, a voice not of defiance alone but of existence itself, and he said, "We are Earth. We are not outnumbered. You face all of us." The effect was seismic. Some alien captains froze, hands trembling on their controls, their will to fight fracturing under the weight of such a declaration. Others snarled in rage and desperation, unleashing wild salvos as though to silence the unbearable chorus. But even the most hardened among them could not deny that something had shifted, that what they faced was no longer a lone human vessel but a manifestation of unity they had never conceived possible. And in that moment Kane knew this was no longer simply survival, no longer just a battle between fleets. This was the awakening of something greater, a bond between humanity and the world that birthed them, a voice that no armada could truly silence. And so as the battle stretched on into what would become legend, the Dauntless fought not as a single ship but as Earth itself given form, standing against annihilation with steel and will, and though the alien admiral swore they would break, though fleets pressed from every angle, the voice of Earth did not falter, and Kane stood taller with every word, every volley, every heartbeat, for he understood at last that outnumbered was only a word, and words meant nothing against the voice of a world. The alien armada, vast as a sea of blades, tightened its encirclement around the Dauntless, their commanders rallying with renewed fury, for though fear and hesitation had spread among them when the ship spoke with the voice of a world, the Zorith admiral knew that fear could be drowned in orders, that hesitation could be beaten into submission if only enough force was brought to bear, and so he commanded that every ship, every weapon, every reserve strike now, that no cost was too great if it meant silencing the one vessel that had shaken their supremacy, and thus the darkness of space flared as thousands of enemy hulls lit with weapons fire, missiles streaking like endless comets, beams crackling with fury, their combined power enough to burn a city from orbit or split a continent. And yet the Dauntless stood, shielded by the resonance of Earth itself, though every impact sent shockwaves through its frame, every volley a test of whether flesh and steel could endure the burden of carrying a planet's voice. And within the bridge, Captain Elias Kane felt the strain deep in his bones, as if each strike landed not just on the ship but on his very marrow, and he knew that this could not last forever, that even with Earth itself bound to them, the tide was too vast, the onslaught too relentless, unless something changed, unless they turned this battle from defense into revelation. Earth's voice whispered within him, in all of them, a sound that filled the bridge like wind across fields: they will not stop. They have known only conquest. To them, survival is domination, and any world that resists is only fuel for their expansion. But they do not understand me, Elias. They do not understand what it is to be a world that is lived in, a world that is loved. Let me show them. Let me speak not only to their ears but to their very essence. Kane, chest heaving, nodded, though he did not fully grasp what such a thing meant, but he trusted, because trust was all that was left, and he gave the only order he could: do it. Show them what Earth is. The ship pulsed, light rippling across its hull in waves of green and blue, a phantom echo of oceans and forests, mountains and rivers, and then the resonance field expanded outward, not as a shield now but as a wave of memory, of experience, carrying with it the scent of rain on soil, the warmth of fire on skin, the laughter of children, the pain of loss, the triumph of love, the sensation of a million lifetimes layered one upon the other, and it washed across the alien fleet like a tide, infiltrating their neural pathways, their ship systems, not as a weapon that burned but as one that revealed, and for the first time in their war-born lives the Zorith saw not numbers, not strategy, not conquest, but what it meant to belong to a home, to walk upon ground that was more than territory, to breathe air that was not merely atmosphere but gift, to feel life not as an asset but as a miracle, and the shock was unbearable to many of them. Some shrieked in terror at sensations they could not comprehend, some froze in awe at visions they could not dismiss, and some wept, though they had never before known the shape of tears. But the Admiral of the Zorith was not one to weep, and though the resonance struck even him, he clamped down upon the fear that rose in his chest, snarled with every bit of discipline forged from decades of command, and roared across the fleet: resist it! This is not truth, this is poison. They seek to weaken us with illusions of sentiment, with weakness disguised as strength. Do not falter, do not yield. Fire everything. Drown them in silence. And with that order came another brutal storm of fire, thousands of ships unleashing their wrath once more, and the void burned around the Dauntless, its shields trembling, hull groaning, the voice of Earth flickering as if dimmed by the sheer intensity of hatred aimed upon it. And for a moment Kane feared that this was it, that even the voice of a world could not stand against an empire's determination to destroy, but then he felt something else, something not from Earth but from the crew itself, from Ramos at targeting, from Dr. Halden down in medical, from Ensign Lee monitoring life support, from every man and woman aboard, their thoughts rising in unison, not words but intent, not commands but love, love for their families, for their cities, for their history, for the very dirt beneath their feet, and somehow that too became part of the voice, braided into Earth's resonance until it swelled again, stronger than before, now not just a planet speaking but a planet with its children declaring, "We are alive. We are together. We are not yours." The tide shifted. Human weapons, guided by the resonance, struck with uncanny precision, dismantling battleships one by one. Alien salvos, once devastating, were bent aside by shields that pulsed not with sterile energy but with the will of an entire species bound to their home. Ships that had seemed invincible shattered. Formations crumbled. And though the Zorith fought with desperation, though they threw their numbers without hesitation, the cracks in their resolve widened, for numbers mean nothing when belief collapses, when unity frays and the voice of Earth was unraveling them. Finally, with his fleet breaking apart, his ships burning across the void, the Zorith admiral appeared on the dauntless comms again, his eyes seething with fury, mandibles clenching so hard the sound cracked across the channel, and he hissed, "You think this changes anything? You think one planet's whisper can stand against an empire? You think your Earth matters in the scale of galaxies? You will fall. If not today, then tomorrow. You are still outnumbered, human." And for the last time Earth answered, and now the voice was not just resonance, not just memory but vision, a projection across the void of what humanity could be, of towers rising not to dominate but to protect, of ships sailing not to conquer but to explore, of worlds healed and skies cleared, of people who endured fire and ice yet built again, and the words came not as defiance but as simple truth, "You mistake us for alone. But we are never alone. As long as we carry each other, as long as we remember, as long as we love, no number is greater than us. This is what you will face, not today only, but for as long as you raise your blades against us. This is Earth. We are Earth. And we endure." The Admiral faltered, his defiance collapsing not because his weapons had failed, but because he saw then that nothing he commanded could undo what had been born this day, that humanity had awakened into something larger than ships and fleets, that they had bound themselves to their home in a way no empire could sever, and though he snarled his final curses and ordered retreat, though the remnants of his fleet limped away into the dark, the damage was done, the myth of Zorith invincibility shattered, and the legend of the ship that spoke with a planet's voice already beginning to spread across channels that no censorship could contain. Silence fell over the bridge of the Dauntless as the last enemy ship vanished into the void, silence broken only by the ragged breaths of the crew, by the soft hum of systems returning to stability, and Kane lowered himself into his chair at last, his body trembling with exhaustion, his eyes burning with tears he had not realized he carried, and he whispered, "We did it. Somehow, against all odds, we did it." Earth's voice, now softer, like waves on a shore, murmured within him, "Not against all odds. With all odds. You are my children. And when you remember me, when you remember each other, you are never outnumbered. Rest now. There will be battles yet to come. But today you endured. And today you won." The crew sat in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of what had transpired, some weeping, some laughing, some staring into the endless stars with renewed wonder, and Kane, his head bowed, understood that the war was not over, that more fleets would come, that humanity's survival was still a fragile thread in the cosmos. But something fundamental had changed, something no empire could erase. Earth had awakened, humanity had spoken as one, and the galaxy had heard, and even if they faced 1,000 more fleets, 1,000 more enemies, he knew now that they would not face them as dust, not as silence, not as outnumbered, but as Earth, united, enduring, infinite. And so the Dauntless, battered but unbroken, drifted in the silence of space, glowing with the faint aura of a world spirit, while its captain and crew looked outward, no longer with fear alone, but with the certainty that from this day forward, no matter what came, humanity was not just a species among stars. They were a voice. They were a world. And they would be heard.